Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
My name is Mila Vasquez, and I'm as damn good with numbers. Too good, as it turned out. Picture this, it's nearly midnight on a Thursday, and I'm still hunched over my desk at Cape Coral Central Bank. The fluorescent lights are buzzing overhead, like angry wasps, and I've got this headache that feels like someone's driving nails into my skull, but I can't leave. Not when I found what I found. Sound of paper shuffling, a sharp inhale. Mr. Henderson's accounts were a labyrinth of lies. Shell companies with names like Sunset Holdings and Coral Bay Investments, all smoke and mirrors. Millions of dollars siphoned away under the guise of legitimate business ventures. And the worst part? The timestamps on these transactions showed they'd been happening for years. Right under everyone's noses. Or maybe not everyone's noses. My hands started trembling as I clicked through screen after screen of evidence. The patterns were too clean, too systematic. Someone with serious access had been orchestrating this. Someone who knew exactly how to hide these transfers in the maze of our daily operations. I printed everything. 300 pages of financial fraud that could bring down not just Henderson, but potentially half the bank's executive team. As the printer churned out page after gamming page, I felt this cold realization creeping up my spine. They had to know. The higher-ups had to know. Which meant I was no longer just an accountant who'd stumbled onto something big. I was a liability. I locked those files away in my desk drawer, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I needed air. I needed a drink. Hell, I needed somewhere loud enough to drown out the voice in my head that kept whispering, "You're in danger, Mila. You're in real danger." That's how I ended up at the Blue Note. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just gone home. That night, made myself some chamomile tea, watched Netflix until I fell asleep on my couch. But no, I chose the jazz club. I chose the music, the dim lights, the escape. I chose her. The Blue Note sat on a corner in downtown Cape Coral, like a secret someone had forgotten to keep. From the outside, it was just another brick building with a simple neon sign. But step through that door and you were transported. The club was bathed in hues of indigo and gold, with exposed brick walls lined with vintage posters of jazz legends. The stage held a trio that night piano, bass, and a woman with a voice like smoked honey singing something slow and sultry that seemed to wrap around your soul. But my attention snagged on the woman behind the bar, Autumn Richardson. Even her name sounded like poetry. She moved like the music, fluid, effortless, completely in her element. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun, with a few rebellious strands framing her face. She wore a black button-down rolled up to her elbows, revealing forearms decorated with intricate tattoos that told stories I wanted to learn. I watched her work, mesmerized. The way she poured bourbon with the precision of a surgeon. How her fingers lingered on each glass before sliding it to a waiting patron. The small smile she gave regulars, the professional nod to newcomers. And then she looked up, those dark eyes deep brown with flecks of amber locked onto mine across the crowded room. A smirk. A raised eyebrow. She finished mixing whatever complicated cocktail she was working on, wiped her hands on a bar towel, and sauntered over to where I was standing awkwardly by a high-top table. "You look like you need something strong," she said, her voice carrying just a hint of a southern accent that made my knees weak. I opened my mouth to order something safe, a vodka tonic, but what came out was, "I look that bad, huh?" Her smirk deepened. Not bad, just dot intense. Like you're carrying the weight of the world on those shoulders. She wasn't wrong. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "For someone who looks like she's had the day from hell, let me work some magic." What was supposed to be one drink became 3, then 4. Autumn didn't just serve cocktails, she crafted them like an artist, painting on canvas. Each one was tailored specifically to the drinker, and she seemed to read people like books. For me, something bold. Spiced rum with burnt orange and a hint of chili that made my lips tingle. To match the fire you're trying to hide, she murmured, sliding the glass across the bar. I took a sip and nearly groaned with pleasure. It was perfect, complex, surprising, with layers of flavor that revealed themselves slowly. How did you? Lucky guess, she said, but her eyes were twinkling with something that suggested it was anything but luck. Our conversation started. Safe, the usual small talk about the weather, the music, how long the club had been open. But gradually, it became something more. A dance of words, flirty and charged, with an undercurrent of electricity that made my skin hum. So, she said, leaning against the bar with her chin propped on her hand. Accountant, right? I can tell by the way you've been calculating the exact tip percentage in your head. I laughed despite myself. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been watching you as closely as I have. The directness of that statement should have made me blush and stammer. Instead, it made me bold. And why have you been watching me so closely? Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for my empty glass. The contact was brief, casual, but it sent a shock of heat straight through me. Because you walked into my club looking like you were carrying secrets that could burn the world down, and I have a weakness for dangerous women. I'm not dangerous, I protested, but even as I said it, I thought about those files locked in my desk. About Henderson and the millions of stolen dollars. About the storm I was about to unleash. Maybe I was more dangerous than I thought, aren't you? Autumn asked softly. Then why do you look like you're deciding whether to run toward something or away from it? The question hit too close to home. Before I could stop myself, the truth started spilling out. The fraud, the fear, the fact that I had no idea what to do next. I told her about Henderson's shell companies, about the systematic theft I'd uncovered, about the growing certainty that people in power had been looking the other way. I should have been more careful, should have kept my mouth shut. But something about Autumn made me feel safe. The way she listened without judgment, asking just the right questions, her dark eyes never leaving my face. So, what are you going to do? She asked when I finished. I don't know. I mean, I should report it, right? But to who? If the bank executives are involved, then you go outside the bank. FBI, state investigators, the press, and destroy my career in the process. Become one of those whistleblowers who ends up blacklisted from ever working in finance again. Autumn was quiet for a moment, cleaning glasses with methodical precision. Then she looked up at me with a slow smile that made my heart skip. You ever consider that maybe tonight isn't about thinking? Maybe tonight is about feeling, about being present in this moment instead of worrying about tomorrow. Her hand covered mine on the bar, warm and steady. Dance with me, she said. I don't dance. I'm not the kind of person who gets swept away by beautiful strangers in dimly lit jazz clubs. I'm practical, responsible. I think things through. But when Autumn Richardson asked me to dance, all of that went out the window. The next thing I knew, her hand was in mine, leading me through the club's back hallway. Past the restrooms, past the storage room, up a narrow staircase I hadn't even noticed before. Where are we going? I asked, though part of me didn't care as long as she kept holding my hand. Somewhere we can hear ourselves think, or not think, depending on what you prefer. The upstairs office was small and intimate, a desk covered in invoices and booking sheets, a comfortable couch, vinyl records stacked in haphazard towers along the walls. But what caught my attention was the view. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the club below, where couples swayed to the music in their own private worlds. Autumn didn't bother with the lights. the neon glow from the club sign outside painted her skin in alternating blues and pinks as she turned to face me. "Tell me to stop," she breathed, stepping closer. I should have. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to be careful, to think about consequences, to remember that I barely knew this woman. Instead, I said, "Don't stop." She backed me against the door, her hands framing my face. "You sure about this?" "I'm not sure about anything anymore," I admitted. "But I'm sure about right now." When she kissed me, it was like stepping off a cliff and discovering I could fly. Her lips were soft but insistent, tasting like the craft cocktails she'd been sampling throughout the night. I melted into her, my hands fisting in the fabric of her shirt, pulling her closer. She made this small sound of approval that vibrated against my mouth. Sound of a zipper, a gasp, fabric hitting the floor. Time became elastic. Minutes or hours could have passed as we discovered each other, the curve of her collarbone, the small scar on her shoulder blade that she told me came from falling out of a tree when she was 8, the way she shivered when I traced the intricate tattoo, that wound around her ribcage, a flowering vine that seemed to grow under my fingertips. "Tell me about this one," I whispered, pressing my lips to the delicate inkwork. "Cherry blossoms," she murmured, her fingers tingling in my hair. "For new beginnings. I got it when I bought this place. And this one?" I asked, moving to trace. Another design on her hip. But she caught my hand, bringing it to her lips instead. "Later, right now, I want to focus on you." And she did, with an intensity that made me forget about Henderson, about the bank, about everything except the way she made me feel wanted, cherished, alive in a way I hadn't been in years. When we finally came up for air, she was looking at me like I was something precious she'd found washed up on a beach. "Stay," she said simply. So I did. Dawn found me in Autumn's bed, tangled in sheets that smelled like her vanilla and salt air, with an undertone of something uniquely her that I couldn't name, but never wanted to forget. Last night had been a blur of lips and teeth, and whispered promises, of learning the geography of her body and letting her map mine in return, of falling asleep with her arm around my waist and her breath warm against my neck. But now, with sunlight streaming through the windows of her apartment above the club, reality was creeping back in. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, then buzzed. Again and again. Autumn stirred beside me, her fingertips tracing lazy patterns on my spine. "You're thinking again." I can practically hear the gears turning. I sighed, reaching for my phone. 12 missed calls. 23 text messages. All from work, all marked urgent. "Henderson's lawyers are already circling," I said, scanning through the messages. "Someone leaked that there's going to be an investigation. They want me in the office first thing Monday morning." Autumn propped herself up on her elbow, those dark eyes suddenly serious. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. If I stay quiet, I'm complicit. If I speak up, You could save people. Other investors, other employees. You could stop this from happening again." She made it sound so simple. But then again, she didn't have a career to lose. She owned her own business, answered to no one but herself. "Easy for you to say," I said, then immediately regretted the words when I saw her face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean, yes, you did. And you're right." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "I don't know what it's like to have a boss, to worry about references and professional reputation. But I do know what it's like to be afraid of doing the right thing because it might cost you everything." There was something in her voice, a weight that suggested she was speaking from experience. "What happened?" I asked softly. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the morning light painting the city in gold. "I used to be married," she said finally, "to a man who seemed perfect on paper. Good job, good family, all the right connections. But behind closed doors, he was different, controlling, violent. My heart clenched. Autumn gold quotes. I stayed longer than I should have. Made excuses, told myself it would get better. But one night, he put me in the hospital, and I knew I had to choose between speaking up and potentially destroying his career, or staying silent and potentially dying. She turned to look at me, her eyes fierce. I chose to speak up. Lost half my friends. Got blacklisted from some social circles. Had to start over completely. But you know what I gained? What? My life, my freedom. This place, she gestured toward the club below. Everything that matters. I felt tears prick my eyes. This brave, beautiful woman had risked everything to save herself. And here I was, worried about my career when people's life savings were at stake. You're right, I said. I have to do something. Autumn smiled, leaning over to kiss me softly. Then let's do it together. What followed was a storm that made Hurricane Irma look like a gentle breeze. I went public on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, it was the lead story on every local news station. By Friday, the FBI had seized Henderson's assets and arrested 3 bank executives, and through it all autumn. Her club became my sanctuary, the one place where I could escape the cameras, the reporters shouting questions, the death threats that started arriving in my mailbox. She'd close early some nights just so we could sit together in the empty club, listening to records and pretending the outside world didn't exist. You know you're a hero, right? She said one evening, curled up next to me on the couch in her office. I laughed bitterly. Tell that to my former colleagues. Half of them won't even look at me, because you made them face the fact that they were complicit in their silence. People don't like mirrors that show them unflattering reflections. She was right, of course, but it didn't make the isolation any easier. The worst part was the scrutiny our relationship came under. Somehow, the press had gotten wind of us, and suddenly I wasn't just the brave whistleblower anymore. I was the whistleblower and her sexy jazz club owner girlfriend in headlines that made my skin crawl. Reality show producers started sniffing around, offering exclusive deals for the inside story of our romance. Paparazzi camped outside the Blue Note, hoping to catch us in compromising positions. Sound of camera shutters shouted questions. Are you two really together, or is this just for the spotlight? Autumn's response to that particular question? Slamming the door in their faces so hard the glass rattled. Vultures, she muttered, deadbolting the door behind us. But the pressure was getting to both of us. I could see it in the way she'd tense up whenever we walked outside together, and how she checked the windows before opening the club each morning. Maybe we should take a break, I said one night, hating myself for even suggesting it, until this all dies down. She turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. Is that what you want? No, but I don't want you to suffer because of my choices too, she said firmly. I chose you, Mila. I choose you every day. And I'm not going to let a bunch of tabloid parasites scare me away from the best thing that's ever happened to me. The fierce protectiveness in her voice made my chest tight with emotion. You mean that? I mean it. We're in this together, remember? Henderson's trial began 6 months later. I testified for 3 days straight, walking the jury through every document, every shell company, every fraudulent transfer. The defense attorneys tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind, but the evidence was overwhelming. Autumn came to court with me every day, sitting in the gallery, where I could see her whenever I needed strength. Her presence was an anchor in the chaos, a reminder that I wasn't alone. On the final day of testimony, Henderson's lawyer asked me the question I'd been dreading. Ms. Vasquez, isn't it true that you've profited considerably from this whole situation? Book deals, speaking engagements, and of course, Your very public relationship with Miss Richardson has certainly raised your profile. I felt my face flush with anger, but I kept my voice steady. I've received some speaking opportunities, yes, but I've donated every penny to organizations that help fraud victims. As for my relationship with Miss Richardson, that has nothing to do with this case and everything to do with the fact that I fell in love with an incredible woman who had the courage to stand by me when most people wouldn't. The lawyer smirked. How convenient that you found love right when you needed a supportive narrative for the media. Objection, the prosecutor called out, but I was already leaning forward to the microphone. You want to know about convenient timing? It was convenient for Mr. Henderson that he had employees too scared to speak up. It was convenient that he had executives who looked the other way. What's inconvenient is that someone finally had the guts to tell the truth. The judge sustained the objection, but I'd made my point. In the gallery, Autumn was beaming with pride. Henderson was convicted on all counts. Sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The Blue Note's grand reopening was everything Autumn had dreamed of and more. During the trial, she'd used the media attention to completely renovate the club. New sound system, expanded stage, a kitchen that could serve more than just bar snacks. The place was packed opening night jazz enthusiasts, curious locals, and, yes, even some tourists who'd come to see the Whistleblower's Girlfriend's Club. I'd found my footing too. The speaking engagements had led to consulting work, helping other companies implement stronger oversight procedures. I was making less money than I had at the bank, but I was sleeping better at night. The settlement from my wrongful termination lawsuit had been generous enough to give me options. I could have moved anywhere, started fresh where nobody knew my story, but Cape Coral was home now. Autumn was home. The real surprise came at midnight on reopening night. The last song had been played. The crowd was buzzing with satisfaction, and I was helping Autumn stack chairs when she suddenly stopped and walked over to the sound booth. Ladies and gentlemen, her voice came over the speakers, causing the lingering patrons to look up. Before you all head home, I need to do something. She took the microphone and stepped onto the small stage, looking directly at me. Mila Vasquez, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. 8 months ago, you walked into my club looking for a drink and ended up changing my life completely. My heart started pounding. The crowd had gone completely silent. You showed me what real courage looks like. Not the kind that comes from having nothing to lose, but the kind that comes from having everything to lose and doing the right thing anyway. She stepped down from the stage, walking toward me with the microphone in one hand. You taught me that love isn't just about finding someone who makes you feel safe. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be brave. She was standing in front of me now, and I could see tears shining in her eyes. So ... she handed the microphone to someone in the crowd and dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Sound of the crowd gasping, collective intake of breath. The ring was perfect, simple solitaire that caught the club's lights and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. Mila Vasquez, will you marry me? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Couldn't could only stare at this incredible woman who was offering me forever in front of a room full of strangers. Yes, I whispered, then louder, yes. Sound of applause, cheers, someone whistling. She slipped the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, then stood up and kissed me like her life depended on it. The crowd cheered around us, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heart beating in perfect rhythm with hers. Today marks 5 years since I walked into the Blue Note for the first time, 5 years since my life changed completely. We're sitting in our usual spot at the bar, my usual spot. Autumn's behind the bar where she belongs, making some complicated cocktail for a customer who's celebrating her promotion. The irony isn't lost on me that it's another accountant finding reasons to celebrate. The club has become something of a landmark now, not just because of the media attention, but because Autumn has turned it into a genuine hub for the arts community. We host open mic nights, poetry readings, even small theater productions on the makeshift stage. I still do consulting work, but I've also started teaching a class at the community college, ethics and accounting. It's not the most popular elective, but the students who take it are genuinely interested in learning how to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Henderson got out of prison last year. I heard he's working at a used car dealership in Tallahassee, which feels appropriate somehow. What are you thinking about over there? Autumn asks, sliding a new cocktail across the bar to me. Something pink and fizzy that tastes like summer. Just thought everything, how different things are now. Good different or bad different. I look around the club at the happy faces, the couples dancing, the musicians setting up for tonight's set. Then I look at my wife, her dark hair now showing just a few silver threads, her wedding ring catching the light as she wipes down glasses. The best different, I say. She leans across the bar to kiss me, quick and sweet, tasting like the cherries she'd been garnishing drinks with. No regrets? She asks. Only one. Her eyebrows raise. Oh? I regret that it took me so long to find the courage to walk through those doors. She laughs, that rich sound that still makes my knees weak after all these years. Well, when you put it that way, she says, I guess we were both pretty brave that night. Music swells softly. You know what I've learned? Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that scare you the most. Sometimes walking into the unknown, whether it's a jazz club or a federal courtroom or a marriage, is exactly what you need to do to become who you're meant to be. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who's willing to walk into that unknown with you. The sound of laughter, clinking glasses, the gentle hum of people in love with life. Some nights, you go out for a quiet drink and end up finding everything you never knew you were looking for. This was one of those nights.